So this room, we understand, is a little special live streaming. Is that correct? Okay. Do we just start or yes? Okay. Excellent. Well, welcome. This is going to be a fabulous panel. We've got just some amazing experience and companies that are representative of many different facets of the OTT, internet delivered video, internet TV, whatever, however you want to call it, industry up here. So you're going to hear some very the information is very current, very current. So welcome. So I'd like to, we're just going to start. I'm going to ask the panelists to introduce themselves, and we're going to launch into a very lively conversation. One comment is I have moderated this panel a few times now, and there was a typo in your program. So the company, so my name is Mark Donegan. The company I'm associated with is called Beamer. It's not Dune HD, so there's a typo there. We actually are in the space of media optimization. So we have technology that can take a compressed file, further reduce it with perceptually identical quality. Our customers are streaming media services, anybody who's delivering video, basically. So just one correction there. So let's start. Albie, I'll let you introduce yourself, and then we'll go down the line.
Hi, I'm Albie Gluten. I work for Sony Network Entertainment. We are the guys who distribute digital goods. If you own a PlayStation 3 or a PlayStation 4 and you buy a game or a movie, or you subscribe to a music service. And I also do a bunch of other things across Sony in Tokyo and with other divisions.
Good morning. I'm going to apologize.
And I have nothing to pitch.
I've got lots to pitch. I'll apologize in advance. The only thing that my 5-year-old apparently likes to share is the sniffles. So if I sound like Barry White this morning on the microphone, I apologize. My name's Ian Greenblatt. I've got business development and strategy obligations for the cloud services business of Aris, one of the larger companies you've probably never heard of. Chances are we have a cable set-top box or cable modem in your house, which is how you'll come to know us. Aris has grown substantially in the last few years with the acquisition of Motorola Home. That's the home business, the cable business of Motorola. We are one of the leaders in set-top box manufacture and sales to North American and international service providers, in addition to cable modem and cable modem technology, and the software that makes all of the video delivery from capture all the way to your eyeballs securely possible.
Ian, I'm sorry you're not feeling well. I'm trying to figure out if I shook your hand. Did I do that? Jim Monroe with Net2 TV. We work with owners and producers of short-form video to create long-form programming and distribute that in various ways. We believe long-form programming is an important and growing part of the internet video landscape, and we want to make sure that our partners who are already quite expert in short-form video have an opportunity to establish brands and programming in this new area.
Hi, Chris Wagner with New Line. We're a technology company, internet TV company. We work with content rights holders, notably a lot of big sports brands. If you're a hockey fan and you use NHL Game Center Live, or if you are an NFL fan, you use NFL Game Pass. These products powered by New Line. We also have an entertainment business here in LA. If you're a Pivot TV customer, or you watch Participant Media or Big Ten Network, or powered by New Line, the World Cup, we worked with Univision to deliver for Univision exclusively all of the Spanish broadcasts in the United States for the World Cup, which was a massive audience.
Christophe Levian, I'm the Chief Operating Officer at MGO. We're an OTT service, movies and TV shows. We carry all the studios and networks. You can find us on most devices. And we're celebrating our launch anniversary in 2 weeks.
David Jones. I run the marketing and business development organization for Vixus Systems. Vixus Systems is a semiconductor system on a chip, pure video play semiconductor company. Our focus has always been on the challenging aspects in terms of video. We come from the transcoding side, And recently, we've taken a leadership position in the new emerging transition from high definition to ultra high definition with the first production-ready HEVC, P60, 10-bit solutions, as well as transcoding solutions in this market.
Excellent, thank you. I'd like to start, so we're going to organize our discussion as follows. We'll spend a bit of time on the technology piece, and then we're going to talk about devices and get the panel's take on the role of devices and how the connected TV relates to products like the Roku and other solutions, game consoles, et cetera. And then we're going to end with some business discussion. There's been in the last week some very interesting announcements with HBO and CBS and Univision announcing or saying that they are going to unbundle and offer their product as an OTT service, independent of a pay TV bundle, which is, I think the panel will have some insights and some comments about, and that's very interesting for all of us who are looking at this space. But I want to start, and Ian, I'm going to start with you. The internet TV, of course, is OTT, right? And which means that there's a difference between how content is delivered over a closed network, so a pay TV, MSO, MVPD, however, whether that's cable or satellite, and the open internet. Now, I think the consumer is becoming very aware of the quality of broadcast television or pay TV television. And the notion that I can get my content anywhere, anytime is important to them, but they still have a certain quality expectation. So I'm wondering if you can give the audience a brief compare and contrast between the benefits and the drawbacks of the internet, OTT, versus a controlled network, and then we'll open up for some other discussion. But I think that's a good place to start.
Sure. Okay, Professor Greenblatt in the
You can
house.
talk into your mic.
Yep.
So.
Okay. I think one of the things I'd point out just before I dive totally into the weeds on the difference between managed and unmanaged networks. HBO, if you recall, around Game of Thrones, the finale let out I believe it was a full-page ad that said, if you like it, perhaps you should pay for it, because the HBO Go service had crashed as a result of so many unanticipated, so namely people who are borrowing other people's logons, users. It was so popular that they actually crashed it. And so if you really like it, you should pay for it and watch it on a cable set-top at your house or some other place so that you can be assured of a certain quality of service. And that's a phrase that should be primary in your mind when you talk about what is the difference between OTT or an unmanaged delivery versus managed delivery of video content, is quality of service. That's really what it all comes down to. On an unmanaged network, wide open internet, it's first come, first serve. Traffic will be prioritized pretty much evenly. And on more or less any ISP, it's a come as you are, come as you go delivery of packets, versus on a closed network. This is a managed network. The hybrid fiber coaxial network that most MSOs operate is a very, very closely managed network designed specifically for highest quality video distribution. Everything else comes secondary. So those, I think, would be the chief differences between the over-the-top delivery. You get what you pay for. And then on the OTT side, people taking down a Netflix or a Hulu know that they're paying, sub $15 a month. They're not paying their $120 some odd a month Comcast bill. And boy, would I be angry, by the way, if my Comcast didn't look perfect, because that's awfully expensive. Whereas Netflix, I know that there's more likely than not going to be some manner of network congestion that causes a hiccup at some point during my playback. And I have to manage my expectations accordingly. I'm only paying $12.95 a month for this. Well, I really can't freak out and pick up the phone and try and call Netflix. Number one, they won't answer the phone. Number two, chances are it's not their problem. It's a peering problem, peering being, we're not going to dive into that, but it's a problem somewhere between Netflix dumping the video packets onto the on-ramp of the over-the-top, aka public internet network, and the delivery of those packets via some manner of ISP to your house. I'm going to take a breath here.
So I won't say Boulder Dash, but I will say that this panel is about the future of TV.
Yes.
And anybody who loves the quality of their cable or satellite service TV and thinks that
Please
high
raise
def
your
is
hand.
really high def is misbelief, it just misinformed. In fact, most customers, as we know, a very high percentage, I don't remember the number, a very high percentage of PS3s and PS4 users think they're watching high def and in fact are not. So but clearly, as many of us have learned with Skype, sometimes the connection is miserable. But if you have good bandwidth, it sounds much better than your analog phone. And so I think that if we're going to talk about the future, the reality of broadband and internet quality is, I hope that's not what Comcast is relying on to keep their business alive.
The answer I was very specifically answering was the delivery of video over cable network. Your Skype example is actually a fairly good one, because delivered over a cable data network, which is more or less, look, you're still going to have a relationship with your cable provider or a telco, but some manner of video service provider is almost certainly going to be attached to your house to deliver those bits to your house. And while I love the notion that people think cord cutting is this massive, terrifying thing in the future or today, it's not actually cord cutting, it's cord shaving. The reduction of services and therefore income to those cable providers is something that they'll make up on the other side. And I'm happy about that because I still sell them that gear too.
Sure. So, all right. So yes, let's
See, I'm trying to keep the crowd entertained.
Well-
No boring conversations here. We want to.
That's right. Yeah, we'll keep the conversation looking at, forward, new technology. So it's interesting. Netflix actually publishes, I don't know if anybody's seen an ISP speed report. And this report's kind of interesting because they rank the connection speed of major ISPs in the US, and actually every region they distribute content in. And what might be shocking is the highest ranked, at least I looked a couple days ago, I don't know how frequently they update it, was Verizon at 3.17 megabits. Now, if any of you are Verizon customers, you're saying, well, how can that be? I do a speed test, I get 30 megabits. I happen to have Cox. I've got a 50 megabit package, and I usually get around 40, 45 megabits. So how could this possibly be? And you mentioned, Ian, that you didn't want to go down the kind of the peering path, but Chris Wagner, I think you might have some perspective, and also Christoph. I would love for both of you to comment, because you're both delivering high quality video. Chris, you're delivering live streams, from what I understand, and at scale. Perhaps if you're able to, maybe you can share, how many connections, how you deliver high quality video that someone says, wow, this looks great. And then Christoph, from a transactional VOD, where, I know you guys, MGO is even looking at, at the latest, 4K and the latest. So I guess, Chris, start with you. And then
maybe I'll give you some real numbers. So Univision spent $340 million to buy the exclusive rights for the Spanish broadcast in the United States for the 2010-2014 World Cup. ESPN had the English broadcast here in the U.S. So that's a lot of money. And their strategy, obviously, anybody that spends that much money on rights, they want to be able to connect to consumers on any screen they want to watch on. I think that's where things are going. Basically, you pick the screen, you watch it on that screen. The numbers were quite good. They had a 4x increase in audience and in their advertising load in comparison to 2010. So that's the business side of it. The numbers in terms of connections online. So this is a 25-day tournament. We delivered 75 million live video streams.
Nice.
That's about 2 billion minutes watched online. We had one match that had 1 million concurrent viewers online at the same time. They had a unique audience over that 25-day period of about 10 million unique viewers, and 87% of that traffic was mobile tablet. 87% was mobile tablet. So you had a lot of games that were at 12 o'clock, 2 o'clock during the weekday. So, you know, it would skew more to PC or connected devices on the weekends or evenings, but 87% mobile traffic. So those are pretty significant numbers. Now, in terms of video quality, the only real way to measure video quality is drop frames and also the average bit rate that customers were getting on their devices. So on the mobile tablet, that averaged about 1.5 to 2 megabit feeds. And on the PC, that's a 3 megabit feed. The quality was fantastic. And you've seen other big rights holders do the same thing. Microsoft did a deal with the NFL. If you watch the NFL Network on Xbox One, it's fantastic. It's a 6 megabit feed, 60 frames a second, all voice controlled. Your set-top box plugs into it. You know, you get the combination of the Surface tablet with the game console all around the NFL and all your fantasy. So those are two examples.
I'm curious, the mobile, was that Wi-Fi connected or RF over a mobile network?
We didn't break it out. But,
okay.
I mean, either way. I mean, just one comment on, you know, video distribution. Video distribution on satellite and cable infrastructure is basically going away. Everything is moving digital. You even have guys like Jimmy Dolan, who runs Cablevision, has 2+ million subscribers, talking about his company as an internet company. The reason for that is it's all what we expect, right? You can personalize things. You know, this panel is about interactive experiences on digital. You know, how you interact with programming and have a conversation back and forth with the things that you like to watch is why digital is the place to be and where the opportunities are around making money because of the way you personalize. And the engagement time for the World Cup, the audience was online on average, this is live now, 90 minutes. So a 90-minute online experience compared with VOD or free video, which averages about 3 minutes maybe, you know, for free on-demand video that you can X in or X out of. So, I mean, pretty good numbers.
Yeah.
Excellent. Chris.
So MGO, we're selling as a TVOD service. So people have an extraordinary high expectation of quality. If you pay $5 for the latest movie, it has to work. And the highest, most important feature they're looking for is no buffering. Customers will accept quality to go down. They will call after 2 buffers event, they will call customer service. And I put strategically the customer service outside of my office, so I know exactly what's happening there. And it's immediate, like 2 buffering on average, you get a phone call. So we're measuring across all our devices. We're on Roku, connected TVs, mobile, you name it. We have real-time information coming every few seconds. And to support what you were saying, like the average bandwidth for it's changing slightly over time and during the day and the week, including for HD in the United States at the moment, you get 3.3 to 3.4 megabits. That's it. So the key to get the quality is really to optimize all the streams for the different devices and to package the files and the videos differently and expand the number of profiles and really serve the video differently for every device. The reality is, while you have a lot of issues in the network themselves, the biggest issue frequently is actually in the home. Like most people are on Wi-Fi, and as soon as you get a few 1 or 2 walls, no matter if you have a high DSL or even better Fi or something like that with 30 or even 100 megabits, you can still get 2 megabits 30 feet away, no matter what. And the compound problem is that a lot of devices, mostly on the low end, on the price point devices, they put single chip Wi-Fi with very small antenna, And you can even put the TV on top of the router. Even if with your speed test, you will measure 30 megabit, the TV itself will get about 1 to 2 meg. So there's a lot of issues with low-end devices. So again, all of that drives camping like myself and others to really optimize the videos and stream very differently, different profiles for every device. When you do that, you can manage a 95 to 99% serving videos with no buffering. It's possible, but it requires a lot of optimization.
That's great. Does anybody else have any observations to add? Well, I've got a question for David for Vixus. And it's open for everybody, but we'll start with Vixus. So on the encoding side, you know, how do encoding choices play into delivering the best quality? Because you know, I made the observation earlier that consumers now with Retina displays, and you know, now there's mobile devices in Japan that I think I've read, or at least they're showing, that are 4K. I mean, how crazy is that? So consumers are really becoming perceptive to quality. They, right. Even though you know, Albie, your observation is correct as well. So many people are watching SD and they think it's HD, and so it's across the board. But the point is that I think overall consumers' view of quality is rising. Right. So therefore, our challenge is we've got these bottlenecks, we have these bandwidth constraints, and yet the capture device is increasing. So you got a 4K camera, you have a 4K display, and in the middle you have the internet. And so let's talk about encoding, because at the end of the day, you know, there are solutions, you know, such as like what my company has that can condition, and but you still have to do the original encode. Right. So tell us what Vixus is doing. And
so we're active in basically 4 business segments. We're active in cloud, consumer electronics, pay TV, and we have a home networking division as well. It's all about moving video through the home, through the network, from the cloud to the individual devices. What we're doing in terms of trying to optimize, and in particular when you talk about OTT, optimizing bandwidth, is there's a number of specifications that are out there, MPEG-2, AVC, and now HEVC. There's a number of tools you can use to implement those specifications, but there's also a number of algorithms you can use to improve the quality, both in hardware and software. Your company's doing a lot of work in software. We're doing a lot of work on the hardware side. What we do differently is we tend to look at video, even though it's a silicon implementation, which is hardware. We tend to look at video as this is an algorithm. If we were to lay out silicon according to an algorithm, it would look very big, it would look cumbersome, it would be very expensive to implement. Our systems architects are software engineers, so that seems ironic that a software engineer is designing physical hardware. Our software engineers, our architects, have no concept of the technology involved in terms of semiconductors. The advantage that gives us is we can look at optimizing algorithms. Things like tools that are not used necessarily in all the encoding solutions, we can optimize those tools and put them into hardware. What's coming in terms of new coding technologies, HEVC is very relevant, I think, in this space, because it does give you the capability to get twice the amount or twice the compression out of existing AVC solutions or MPEG-4 solutions on the market. But the downside of that is that not all of those devices support it. So almost if you want to improve the quality, you also have to invest in technologies that can transformat or transcode those technologies back into the original formats. And that's really what our company is focused on, and optimizing that in the internet space.
So you mentioned HEVC. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes here, and just discuss the state of HEVC. But curious, I do want to connect the dots. I realize we've been focusing on the distribution piece of video, so we haven't been talking about, quote, the interactive piece. So I just throw out kind of a general, throwing the ball in the air and somebody grab it, and maybe Jim Monroe, this would be perfect for you. Tell us, what you're doing, and also what trends you're seeing, what others are doing to create new immersive experiences. So at the end of the day, if we're just delivering video, but we're using the internet instead of a managed network, okay, that has certain efficiencies and benefits, but it's not that much different. So what are you doing, to create new experiences for the consumer?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it seems silly to say, but this is a business in an enormous amount of transition. And you could say that every time we do this panel, and probably the next several times. But what we're seeing is, particularly in connected televisions, but to a lesser degree in other devices, the notion of the App Store having, as a paradigm in smart TVs, works great in tablets, works great in phones. You've got a keyboard to interact with the device. You're in a sort of a lean back, if not hunched over sort of posture. In a connected in a living room, and you're sitting and watching a connected television and you have a remote in your hand and you're sitting on a couch and you're leaning back, your expectations and your ability to navigate with that device are completely different. So while you can deliver a really high quality video signal to that device, helping the consumer to find the thing they want to watch is extremely difficult. Roku has something like 1,800 apps now, which is terrific. I would venture to guess, and I don't know this for a fact, but I would get 95% of their use comes from probably 5 of them. And there are probably 25 that are really, really good video apps. I have no idea how to find the other 20. So that discovery problem that the App Store presents is really enormous. So overcoming that, and I think that the consumer electronics manufacturers who have gone this way on these larger screens are also beginning to rethink it. I think they're seeing for themselves that the usage is not what they were expecting. And I think that they're beginning to rethink how they design an interface to help to surface and create discovery of programming that people don't already know about. Those things are becoming more and more important to them.
Interesting. Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, I have maybe some examples around interactive features that drive engagement, because remember, the longer you can keep somebody online, the better the opportunity to monetize that person, either through advertising, a pay-per-view transaction, like an Apple TV or a subscription. So I'll use 2 examples, a sports example and an entertainment example. So sports, if you watch sports on a digital device, there's some interactive features that scale very nicely that drive engagement, meaning, they're very sticky. Instant replay in slow motion, picture-in-picture, quad screen viewing of multiple events. Rogers up in Canada spent $5 billion over the next 12 years to buy all the hockey rights in Canada, and they're making a multi-million-dollar investment in content creation, cameras on the refs, cameras in the goals, ISO cameras to follow particular players. So how all that video gets surfaced in an app intuitively so that a fan can pick and choose what cameras they want to watch, personalize that experience, is an example of interacting and create live stats. The ability to cut and clip in a live game highlights that get produced and syndicated out through Twitter less than 2 minutes after the touchdown. Taking that live clip and putting a pre-roll on it and allowing it to be retweeted through your social media networks lifts ad load. So these are all examples in sports of interactive features that make money. On the entertainment side, they're starting to catch up. Entertainment is more of a passive experience, certainly when you watch movies. But if you look at some of the things that HBO's done with Game of Thrones, you're going to see more metadata kind of being a part of a timeline of something that you watch that would allow you to drop back into past episodes, freeze a live feed, go rewatch something, get information about a particular character, and then jump back into the live broadcast. Those are sports examples that are being applied to entertainment that, again, are interactive features that kind of drive, that consumer stickiness. And these are all things that you can do on digital. It's very difficult to do, on a different kind of platform.
Well, sometimes it's not the added features, but it's the video content itself. Most of our partners who produce short form video are magazines, like some of the magazines of Time and Bonnier, Popular Science, and those guys. And they have, what you were talking about earlier, the typical duration of viewing on websites, it's 2 or 3 or 4 minutes. It's
right.
As long as a clip, maybe a little bit more. those same clips organized into television programs and presented on connected devices, larger screen TVs and tablets that are being used as televisions. We get 20, 25 minutes of viewing of a half an hour program, really a 24-minute program.
Yeah, live, I think the difference between live and on demand, I mean, the only real appointment you're going to keep is around a live broadcast, right? If you're a big Game of Thrones fan, you're going to watch that Sunday night because everybody's going to be talking about it the next day. You don't want to miss it and be behind. Sports, even more so. The reason sports rights fees are so expensive is really the last place the audience shows up in mass. Everything else is all spread out. Netflix, all spread out. Movies, all spread out. You know, that's why entertainment is trying to drive episodic, big deal things to get the audience to show up because that's where the money is. But for the most part, everything's spread out, right? So appointment TV basically goes away, with the exception of definitely sports and maybe certain episodic things that have a big following.
I'm going to give you also a view from the manufacturer. So we work very closely with a lot of the big brands like the Samsung, Roku, etc. And one thing there that I'm seeing very strongly happening is triggered by two things that these brands are facing. Number one is that they are now able to get some revenue share of applications that are used on their devices. So a very strong incentive to keep people within their app stores, which was mentioned, versus going to another input. When someone plays a DVD, a Blu-ray, or even goes to the cable box, they can't see any revenue out of this. The second thing is that I've heard several executives in those companies really trying to not have their panel be just a panel. Like if I'm a big user of Netflix or Crackle or any other service, when it's time to renew my TV, I don't really care really which TV I buy as long as the app is there. And so the brands can go away, which is very scary when you sell devices and specifically televisions. So the combination of those two is actually really pushing those device manufacturers to really move forward in providing stronger interfaces to consumers, such that immediately when you boot your TV, you don't have the static. You get directly an application. You don't have to manage input. Like the latest example is the Roku TVs coming out in collaboration with Hisense and TCL. Like you boot directly into Roku. You don't have to manage inputs. You don't have to figure out anything. It's all built in. And so you will see more and more of those type of integration, the same way you have on a tablet. If you boot an iPad, you directly have the apps, and televisions are very quickly moving into that world where inputs move away, and they have a very strong interest to keep people using content for which they can get a little fraction of the revenue.
Something you mentioned is really key, and that is the shift in the consumer electronics business. That traditionally, a consumer electronics manufacturer will build what a retailer will sell, right? So Walmart or Target or Best Buy very often are determining the features and the prices that LG and Samsung are building. As these guys realize that there is the potential for post-sale revenue for themselves, it does change their priorities a little bit, and it makes them want to put features in and increase usability so that they have that opportunity. That's a very key point, I think.
So this is the point where Albie says, okay, Mark's going to call on me because Sony, I love having Albie on the panel because as a content owner, as a service provider, and as a device manufacturer, you have a very interesting perspective. What are your observations, comments? Can you share any insights?
Well, I think that we're in a world where the device that controls what you watch is typically not the screen itself. I would have thought it would be the cable boxes, but their cycles are too slow. So if you're looking at a Roku, or you're looking at a Fire TV, or you're looking at Chromecast, you're starting to see inexpensive devices that you plug in that are on much faster cycles than the TVs. And so from a Sony point of view, we get to control this stuff because we have many, many tens of millions, actually north of hundreds of millions of customers with PS3s and PS4s. And so we have people who are using those devices and starting initially from that screen where we can control their experience and we can give them all the applications that run on those devices. I think that it's difficult to try to keep a TV up to speed with the latest applications. And so it's going to be a sidecar of some kind or another.
So I would like to talk about the role of, a couple of years ago, the hot trend and discussion topics were second screen. Everything was second screen, second screen. I think the conversation has shifted since then, but this is a perfect pivot to discuss, and I'd like to get some insights and some observations about the role of the tablet, or let's just call it a mobile device, because now with phablets and, what's a tablet, but with a secondary device, a mobile device, and a big screen, so a TV, is now the content via, say, Apple, Apple TV and Chromecast, is the mobile device now essentially where I'm browsing and then I'm redirecting a URL to the TV, so it becomes more of kind of my search discovery, but I'm viewing it on the big screen. Is it controlling the big screen? Is there, what's happening? What are the trends?
It's all of those things.
Yeah. Tell us more.
So as a former proponent, well, I'm still a proponent of second screen technology, although last night I heard Hardy Tankersley tell us, no, second screen's dead, get over it. Yeah, it was hard to laugh about that one. You're exactly right. And the tablet and mobile device, as you rightly point out, is really about the continued personalization and optimization of the consumer experience, of making it better for me and making it more likely that I will consume the content that I was actually looking for. Those four phases, the search, discover, recommend, and fulfill, four stages that have to occur on the device I have, and I'll watch the best one I have access to. And if that's a panel on the wall in the room that I'm in, great. And if I don't happen to have control of that panel because I don't have some manner of dongle or AirPlay or Chromecast or Roku or an Air something, I will watch on the device that I do have access to, and I'll watch on the best one I have. So if I have a tablet in my bag, I'll pull out the tablet in my bag because it's a more fulfilling experience than is the device that's in my pocket. But either way, I think the four biggies that you very rightly point out on mobile devices, it's that search, discover, recommend, fulfill. It's enhancing the consumer experience. And yeah, they will, consumers are certainly after the most personalized, that's not a word, the one they can personalize for themselves and enjoy.
So can I ask the panel a question on that? Because I want to know personalization for the user. Nobody seems to know who's in front of the TV. I would have thought this problem would have been old news, that you would be customizing things for the person who's watching, and yet the apps on the phones that control the TVs, the custom, they used to talk about how you could tell who's holding the remote control by the jitter in their hand. Nobody seems to know. Netflix, least of all, now that they use, and everybody just chooses the same one because it doesn't work. How do we get to find out who's actually in front of the screen?
But it does work, and there's the creepy factor.
No, it doesn't work, because if you have children, the way they filter it, it is so restrictive that all your children immediately use the adult password.
Yeah.
I have an 11-year-old, and all he can see is Ernie. So he has
All my
my
kids use
password.
my ID, so they all think.
Yeah, that's
Right, and then my ID, all it shows me is My Little Pony.
right. My point exactly.
I got you.
I do think though, on a subscription business, you do know more. It's a good question, right? On regular television, with Nielsen and the things that they've done in that world, it's still more a guess than it is a science.
Certainly over the last few months.
In a subscription product, you definitely know who signed up because you're billing them. You didn't necessarily know that's the person watching.
Right.
No, it's a good question?
phone. We're digitally, we're all measuring impressions, right? And we think that if I see an ad play out on a device, I just made an impression. If you've cast that to a television and there's 6 people in the room, you just made 6 impressions and you're only getting paid for 1. And that's where Nielsen is trying to come in and help to solve that problem, because they endeavor to tell you who's in the room and what's their gender and what's their age, and give you that demographic back.
Right, but your point about the phone is right on. You do know who's holding the phone.
Exactly. But it's
Yeah.
the creepy factor, right?
But I
Do you really want to put out there that, yes, I do know who's in your house because I can take a look at your router and I can see which devices are on your router at any given time and which one's currently being activated?
But it is going the direction of target marketing. You can market a mess. I mean, you see that now just with cookies, man. You go in and look at one thing, on a store, and next thing you know, you get ads for the next month following you about that. Right?
You're still just describing a household, though. You're still not talking about who's watching Game of Thrones right now.
Yeah.
It's still a tough question to answer.
So
This
from a-
comes back to the
I don't know if you
over-the-top
need it right
question,
now.
because you are saying, if I'm just using my cable service or my satellite service and it's on the TV and someone selected play, there is no way we know who's watching it.
Yeah.
And so we are not being able to either target recommendations or advertisements. And when they're on the tablet or they're on the phone or they're controlling the TV from their phone, you have a much better idea of who's doing that.
Yeah.
And I think the economics, though they have not differentiated yet, they will differentiate.
So the technology exists to do this. I think one of the things that we've lived in for the last, I don't know how many years pay TV's been around, but it's specified by an MSO or an operator that they put down a specification, and typically there's a device which is built to that specification. There's no new intelligence going into that. If you take from the algorithm side, from basically the complexity that's now going on to system on a chip solutions, there's a lot more stuff that we can do with metadata. There's a lot more stuff we can do with video. We can do image recognition. We can do facial recognition. We can customize the video that's coming into a device depending on a customer's preferences. If it's sports, for example, it can look at different logos for a different sports team, and it can recommend that sporting event is on a different channel and automatically pull up a window which would say, hey, I recognize this. There's an image in here that I recognize as one of the things that you watch constantly, sporting events, and you can start programming that into your device. It's just that the mechanism to do that from an MSO, from an operator's perspective, hasn't been there today. And I think those things are available from a technology perspective today. So from an applications perspective, it's a case of people writing the applications and making use of the user interface. I think I heard once that content is king. So if content is king, the user interface is queen. That's going to be the next big thing.
But it's a good point. I think the technology is ahead of the business. The Big Ten
Absolutely.
Network rolled out dynamic ad insertion with them probably 2 years ago.
Yeah.
It took 2 years for the sales side to figure out how to sell ads on the broadcast side. Now they have the ability to sell inventory on the digital side. You could do mid-rolls, post-rolls, pre-rolls. You had all this extra stuff, right? But trying to create value for it and get a big brand to pay for it, they had to catch up.
It's an age-old problem.
That's great. I do want to spend a little bit of time talking about advertising and ad tech, and so this is a perfect pivot. But are there any questions? Okay. Yes. Okay, so second screen's killer app is identifying the user, being able to identify yourself.
Yeah, and Twitter Amplify has seen really great success in creating tune-ins, right? So as your social media and you amplify things about a show that's going on now, they have some great numbers that show how that drives tune-ins and drives people back to change the channel to something they may not have been watching but just showed up in their social network.
I'm going to get myself into trouble. They have great numbers that show a correlation. I don't know if they have great numbers that show cause and effect.
But they
That's
have good
a
numbers
whole
for
other
tune-in.
panel, though, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
Real issue is who controls the signal that's switching.
Agreed.
Yeah, I want to defend poor
usually
Hardy
the woman.
Tankersley, who I may have maligned in absentia from his comment last night of second screen is dead, deal with it and get over it. I think what he was talking about was exactly, whispering in my ear, the actual answer I'm trying to formulate. It is the experience, the second screen pitched experience, the second stream of related content. And I think that's what he was getting at, was creating an entirely new second experience on the tablet in your lap that goes with time synced, the thing on your wall. I think that's what he was getting at, and that one's kind of had its day.
Leaving aside the Google TV science experiment, to Al's question of personalization, because I mean, it was remarkable when I fired up my PS3 and there was Netflix with Max asking, what are you looking for? You know, walk me through this really great interface, you know. I would argue that this multi-screen, not second screen, world, Amazon has done a hell of a job figuring this out. And certainly Google has. Do you see any strategic partnerships emerging when those two players and traditional sort of media delivery or content creation organizations?
I believe their view, and I know some people who work directly for Jeff, and I know people who work at Google, their view is that all the legacy guys are toast, that they're just going to own it, that they're not going to need those guys, that the crowds will create the new content, they will source it, they'll distribute it, you'll get pennies for ads dynamically, and they would say, I would be shorting all the studios.
Well, content is hard, is all I can say.
No, but I think
And good content is difficult to manufacture. So it has value. And defending my poor customers, I would say that no, they're not toast. Their business model will change ultimately. But
Note that Netflix acts more like an old media company,
Yeah.
but Amazon and Google don't. I'd say Amazon and Google opinion is that they're toast. I'm not necessarily weighing in on whether or not they're toast, but clearly,
These are not necessarily the opinions of management.
well, at Google and Netflix they are.
But is your question how,
I mean, at Google and Amazon they are.
is your question how content rights holders and consumer electronics partner? Is that what you meant?
No, just essentially the question that I'll answer. I don't know how many years I've been coming here. There's always the proverbial, 23-year-old millennial standing with the mic, talking to the media, folks saying, you don't get it, you don't watch TV. This personalization thing really, I think the other key chunk of it is what do you do about discovery in a YouTube world, right? That's where millennials are watching. So you've got all this unstructured metadata, unstructured tagging. I mean, we know about cake parrot, obviously, but it's all the other stuff. So there's a lot of sort of artificial intelligence could be applied to that. And Google clearly is in a position to do that.
I think that's one of our biggest concerns is that the only people with a broad view across the data are Google. So if you have a channel and you use Google Analytics, you can find out about your 1 million customers, what they did with your content. You have no way to market to customers directly. You have no visibility into what customers are doing with us. Google has all of this data. They know everything about everybody. And they only give you a little tiny view into that. So I am candidly much more nervous about them than I am about Comcast.
But I don't think premium content creators or buyers actually rely on YouTube for anything other than to grab some extra.
Just wait. I remember before Justin Bieber, when the music industry said, no recording artist is ever going to break on the internet.
Yeah, but I'm talking more like it's, NHL, NFL, NBA, UFC. They're not relying on YouTube or Google to build their business.
Well, they're different media. I think that's a mistake that a lot of us make, is that thinking that YouTube and television are kind of the same thing. And they're not really. And if you look at, I think it was a Nielsen cross-platform report that showed that millennials are consuming huge amounts of short form video through YouTube and Vine and things like that compared to older people. But they're only watching a tiny fraction less traditional television than their older counterparts. So it's
channels on YouTube with 100 million viewers.
absolutely. But it's an additive experience, I guess. It's additive to the ecosystem. It doesn't replace television viewing. At least it hasn't so far.
And those channels, by the way, don't have the significant advertiser dollars and significant advertisers in them that broadcast satellite delivered cable do.
Well, if I'm selling chewing gum, don't I want to get the cable carriers crowd?
Sure.
I mean, isn't that just a really, what's going to happen?
Well, and I wanted to point out something that I pulled off mic and mentioned to Albie, which is take a look at the difference between the CPM in Simpsons on Hulu versus the difference versus the CPM in Simpsons on broadcast.
Absolutely.
So the fact that, and I think it was Albie, I'm not sure who very, very smartly pointed out that OTT ad sales, they know so much more about their customer and can sell so much more granularly that impression, and it's worth so much more as a result. That there's a significant model change there. But what I did also want to point out is that there's a, how do I say this? Until Google Analytics could be seen as a commodity metric like a Nielsen, and I'm not touting the magnificence of Nielsen, certainly not over the last few months, until it can be sold, bought and sold like a commodity metric, it's largely meaningless to advertisers other than as a checksum against the stuff they've already paid for.
Right. Yeah. I'm not speaking as an advertiser. I'm speaking as a content creator.
Yeah.
But does anybody understand the asymmetry of CPM where it is the higher your audience, the higher your CPM, not on per watcher. You get more per watcher if there are a lot of watchers than if you're more targeted.
Well, certainly true in broadcast.
Yeah, I just don't understand. If you have people watching a home improvement show, why would you pay less for an ad selling hammers to a home improvement show than you would for an ad selling hammers to, a pageant?
Yeah, the World Series.
I just don't. And I assume that's going to change, and that the targeting and the more direct environment where people are watching stuff on their phones, and that ultimately the targeting will turn out to have more value than the mass CPM factor.
So let's talk about advertising some more, specifically the technology side. And what I think is interesting is up until this point, other than IPTV services, you basically had transactional VOD where, I pay to watch a show, I get a right for, rent it basically for 24 hours, 48 hours, whatever. Or you've got SVOD. Now you have services like Sony Crackle, which appears to be doing quite well with a purely advertising model. So AVOD. And what does that mean in terms of technologies that need to be adopted or furthered or bettered so that we can deliver, highly targeted, relevant ads? And, I'd be curious to get some input, comments, observations, what you're tracking, and maybe I'll be good to start with you because of Crackle.
So yeah, I guess, as the difference between Netflix and HBO starts to disappear, I guess the difference between Crackle and ABC, ignoring the quality and the cost and all that other stuff, but of AVOD versus broadcast disappears as well. They're the same model. You give it away and you make money on the advertisement, and whether they get it over the top and whether or not you get a fee from the service provider for providing that channel, it's still the same thing.
I think one of the things that certainly we've really tried to work hard on, and I think all of us can still improve, is if you're presenting, particularly in long form programming, right? If you're doing a pre-roll, this is less of an issue, but if you're presenting a program or a film with routine, regular commercial breaks, interstitial ad pods, you're really obligated to make that a very seamless consumer experience. And if I have two, even if I only have two ads in a break, if I have to wait 10 seconds before each 30-second ad for something to load, and that's a problem. So it's the consumer-facing display technology that really has to make that as seamless as possible, regardless of the video format, regardless of the screen.
So give some insights in the technology that's involved in making that seamless, because as usual, what's simple is actually quite complex behind the scenes. So can you give some insight, or Chris?
I can say whenever we can, we use HLS, which is a way of stitching video together before it gets to the device. So we can stitch the ad into the program stream, and it just plays out very, very nicely.
Server side.
Server side. That's
Yeah.
exactly
So
right.
to your point, I mean, in a live stream is even more difficult, right? So you need to be able to take the same Q tones that you would have for broadcast through encoding, have those in and outs, call an ad unit, dynamically insert it, stitch it server side, so it comes across your screen just like regular television.
And then the advertiser is saying, well, wait a minute, if you're doing it server side, then where is the cookie stuff and the beacons and all the things that I'm accustomed to getting off of a handheld device or a PC? And then that's an industry education issue, among other things. So
Yeah, and
we have
then-
to simulate that.
And you have big broadcasters. Univision's a great one, right? Where they're the HLS, Nielsen, watermarking, the digital products that we've done for Univision get certified by Nielsen along with ComScore and armature data, and all that kind of gets blended together. So then when you take that back into your affiliate sales side and your ad sales side, you actually have an audience that has data from core pieces. The ComScore is the way advertisers pay on digital, right? That's their measurement, not Google Analytics, and Nielsen on the other side. So when all that data starts to come together, you get a real good view of what's happening.
So Chris, did you have to build your system, or do you turn to somebody who's serving these ads for you, or is it a combination?
Yeah, we'll work with the ad server technology, whether it's a Freewheel or an Adobe or a DoubleClick. I mean, they're good at that. So we would integrate there so that the ad rules get delivered, and we take on the responsibility to make sure the ad gets in there with that experience you're talking about, that's seamless, so that the ad runs at the right time in the right geo for the right segment.
What makes that complicated is when you start working across, connected TV and other devices where there's absolutely no technical standardization.
Exactly.
And you're talking about, it's not just Firefox and IE and Chrome.
So
Chrome. It's-
And here's a shameless plug. Oh, go ahead.
Just to ask a related question, is streaming an antidote to TiVo? We all lived in this world where
Yeah.
stuff was there and it was easy to skip the commercials, and suddenly in a streamed universe, you can't fast forward anymore.
TiVo was I was there when they first got started. TiVo was a short-term solution for a lack of bandwidth, right? VOD was not practical. You couldn't have more than a couple of houses in a neighborhood watching a VOD stream without everything crashing. So TiVo moved the storage into the living room, not into a central location, so that the streaming was very localized and didn't require a lot of bandwidth. Now the bandwidth is there, both for VOD and for all the IP stuff we're talking about. I do wonder if the DVR's days are over.
Well,
Yeah, but live is different, because live is, you can record a football game, but if you heard the score, you're pretty bummed out.
yeah, and if you're a service
Right, but
provider,
It's just not the same thing.
Yeah, that's the traditional view on TiVo, but I'm just saying that what's happening from a piracy perspective, which is sort of similar, you start to look at when you're streaming, you're connected directly, you no longer have the option of skipping around and jumping stuff and avoiding the monetization.
you had
But I
mentioned
think-
before, I wanted to
Yeah.
jump in with one thing. You mentioned that the quality of the experience was important, and that's with that's with content with markers in them for the ad in, ad out. Where there is content with no markers in it, it starts to get a little difficult to do digital ad insertion. And one of the things
Well,
that
it's
we're
more
trying to,
manual. You
well,
can still insert them, it's just. more
and that's
manual.
exactly the point. That's a very difficult and headcount intensive process.
Unless you find a partner and you pay them to do it.
Or invent a technology that's markerless ad detection.
There you go. Congratulations.
Exactly.
Christoph, David, any?
I think there was a comment earlier saying if the DVR is dead. I mean, I can understand if we're saying if the world is not moving or moving forward, but when you start to look at innovations in the consumer electronics space, when you talk about 4K TVs, that bandwidth over an OTT network goes up substantially. I can see a case where you're going to have some sort of storage mechanism in the home to service that for a long time to come. It's not going to disappear through a pure streaming model.
And moving expensive storage upstream into the head end versus having lesser priced or smaller storage still on the set top. Our operators are interested in seeing occasionally, well, they're always interested in seeing lesser priced set top boxes, but moving the centralized storage maybe to a gateway unit and having less expensive, kind of slavish, smaller IP set tops scattered throughout the house, or a very smart panel that can, in lieu of a slave set top, make sure that your conditional access stuff box is checked.
Exactly.
But the DVR is not dead, but I can see where
It's merging.
larger scale storage is being moved back into the network.
Although I go back to Albie's comment at the beginning, which was, people are willing to make a sacrifice in quality for convenience and price. And I think that's, I don't know how successful 4K sales have been, but I don't know. And I know that people are on the content side are preparing for it. But I think that's, if I don't have to plan ahead to schedule a recording and I can watch it right now because I have a URL, I think I'll take something that's not 4K.
Well, I think the problem is going to be, if you look at from a Hollywood perspective, and several panels have discussed this in terms of the cost, the amount of cost, or the amount of money goes into making high quality premium movies, for example. And you can relate the same issue to sports as well. You're not going to get that through an OTT service. You're not going to get that return of revenue of an OTT service. There is a market there for delivering very high quality content. And if you look at what Movie Labs is doing in terms of defining the storage requirements and the security requirements for 4K, it does have tremendous amount of value. Certainly from a technology perspective, it's a leapfrog in terms of what's required to deliver that technology. From the studio's perspective, and we've heard a number of discussions, it's not just about the resolution, it's about completely redefining TV going forward. We heard about faster frame rates, we've heard about high dynamic range. All of these things play into a new user experience, a premium service experience that Hollywood can suddenly say, hey, I can get my return of investment more than just the movie studios or more than just going to the cinema. I can get my return of investment from the users at home. And they will pay for that. They will definitely pay lots of money for that versus degradation in quality.
So speaking of user experience, which device is best positioned? Does the panel think to, is it the game console? Is it the connected TV? Is it, a mobile device to really provide something special to the consumer?
A game console's hard to watch when you're on the New York subway. It's just impossible. There's nowhere to plug in. You're really packed in that subway. I don't know if anybody here's work, but you can barely even get a suitcase in there when you're trying to go to LaGuardia.
Probably won't get it home either.
Somebody's gonna steal it.
Help you out with that.
So you're not coming back with that game console.
Well, speaking of user experience and legacy TV, when are they going to stop making the grid?
Yes.
I mean, who
Service providers.
goes up and down the channels and forward and back in time? What?
You know what you're probably going to see before it goes away? You're probably going to see more of the App Store guys going to something like that because the App Store is not working and they're seeking solutions. And I think some of them are looking at a grid-like presentation of OTT content.
Oh, now that's interesting. Unpack that a bit further because you just made an observation that I want you to explain. The App Store is not working.
Yeah.
Can you go into greater detail?
There's just such the discoverability, the Ian's point. What was the four things? Discoverability, recommendations, something else, and
discover, recommend, fulfill.
thank you very much. Is really tough on a television with an app store. It's tough to type with a remote. It's tough to search. It's tough to discover and all that stuff.
It's actually more than that. Like, as everyone may hate the PG guide, the one thing it does is showing content first, and yes, it's organized by each channels. But when you go to an app store, you have first to make a decision, where do I want to go versus what do I want to watch?
Yeah, that's right.
Right? And that is a fundamental problem. True, if you have 10 channels or 1,500 channels you have on Roku, like you have to make the decision where. And where is not like, I don't know, because mostly with all the complexity you have with the content windows, it will be on a pre-DVD will be on this app, but post DVD will be on more apps, unless you're in the HBO window, unless it's like, you never know where it is. And so asking the question to a consumer where you want to go is just the wrong one.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So as they try to think of another paradigm than the App Store, I think some of them are considering a more of a grid-like experience that, as you say, puts the content first and the location is secondary.
Yeah, I mean, isn't it mostly, the good UIs are all on demand. So what you look at when you turn on your TV is those programs that you have recorded or that you are saved or you expect to watch. And it's kind of rhetorical. I have no idea why all these devices still use this archaic thing that was designed for 7 channels.
Yeah. But the manufacturers have to do something, right? Because to get any kind of revenue post-sale, they're not going to get anything out of Netflix. Netflix has all the leverage in that negotiation. So they got to leverage.
I'm curious, is there any numbers or data that anyone knows or can share about these app stores, 1,000, 2,000 apps, and yet, how often does a consumer go beyond the second page? Or
I'll share, but I can't attribute. Is that okay?
Okay.
So 2 things that I can't really talk about, but I'm about to while we're live streaming. All right. Won't be here next year. 2 things. One is that one of our consumer electronics manufacturers has said that. Yeah. Independent contractor. Anybody got a job? One of our consumer electronics manufacturers has said in the App Store there's a 95% app abandonment rate. So I will shop around for apps. 95% of the time I will uninstall it because it was so unsatisfying. So if you have to go and install and then try and then uninstall an app to discover the 20 out of 1,800 that have value, you're never going to do it. There was always the other statistic. The other statistic was even better.
I'm just curious, how often does a consumer go beyond the first page or the second page? Because that means if you're not in the first or second page, you're.
I think
same with the Google
I think
search.
they do what we all do. You walk over to your laptop, you get some recommendations, you do a little searching, and you know ahead of time what you're going to like, and then you go put it on your TV. Because otherwise, it's like torture.
And that's the importance of contextually relevant recommendations, right? I don't want you to just check out because I'm the Netflix account under my kid. That's not enough. In a usable guide, one that makes contextually relevant recommendations is the one that's more likely going to surface a piece of content that you'll actually want to watch. And when I mean contextually relevant, I mean who's watching, what time of day they're watching, how long they have to watch. I mean, there's a whole bunch of factors that can come into play. Again, we're going to go back to the creepy factor. Do I really know do I have access to your calendar? Can I see that you have an appointment the next half hour? There's a number of variables that could influence a recommendation. Unfortunately, as we go ahead, what you'll see is in the market that recommender companies' recommendations are largely commodity, unfortunately. And whereas this is something that should be, which is a tremendously important part of a satisfying consumer experience, those recommendations are largely seen as just commodity. It doesn't come at a
They're
big
largely not very good.
Yeah.
I agree.
I think it's like you would say that Yahoo, in the days of Yahoo being the #1 search engine, that search was a commodity, and then suddenly Google showed up and you went, oh, wow, you can actually do it noticeably better. I'm still waiting for the good recommendation engine. The observation I just made when you're talking about the App Store is that the App Store is kind of like YouTube. Millions and millions of choices and only a few at the top that get real traction.
Right, but YouTube banks on your ability to search and search through that infinite database. You can't do that on a TV.
Right.
It's really hard. You said
Well,
what device is the best device? I actually think it's the tablet. Because it does all the things that Ian says are important. I can discover stuff on the tablet. I can find it, whether it's on a web page or it's an app or anything, I can find it. And then it's personal. So I can watch it by myself. I can move around the house with it. If I have to, I can cast it to a bigger screen.
And you can go in the subway with it.
And you can
That's
run the
right.
with it. And you can hit the people over the head who are trying to steal your game console.
Okay, one last question. This is a good one to spark some conversation, and then I will open it up for 1 or 2 questions as we have time here. So HBO, CBS, Univision, I think in the last week or 7 days or less, made announcements that effectively there's 2 points that I think are important. The unbundling of content that traditionally was tied to a pay TV bundle, but OTT distribution. So they're going to distribute it over the internet. What does that, what does it mean? Give us some thoughts. And
shows that some are smarter than others.
some are smarter than others, yes.
I mean, it's inevitable. Everybody's going to go that route. I mean, the business models are starting to get sorted out. Univision is doing it with Uvadeos, which is telenovelas, which will be, you can watch either with a subscription credit card transaction or with ads, uncoupled from authenticating it with their affiliates.
And from what I understand, there's a massive audience, right, for that content.
60 million Spanish speakers in the United States.
Yeah.
It's one of the fastest growing demographics in the U.S.
That's right.
They're the fifth largest network in the United States.
But
Yes.
that specific genre, though, is
Yeah,
really, there's a lot of fans.
And I have 4 kids, and 2 kids live in Manhattan, and they're girls, they're daughters, they not watch sports. So HBO Go, they were like high-fiving, right? They have a data line and Apple TV, and that's what they live on.
What'll they find out how much it costs?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Well, that don't bother me.
HBO makes a lot of sense. Again, depends on what they cost and what they include. Telenovelas make a lot of sense. I'm not sure that CBS, I'm not sure I understand that one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think Aereo scared them, so.
Well, I think also,
That's going to be.
I mean, CBS might be doing it for a bunch of other reasons. I think we should be careful about judging these things on their initial success. HBO may very well be too expensive and not have the growth everybody anticipates. CBS may have missed their demographic a little bit, and maybe their programming doesn't appeal to people who are inclined to watch video online. So they may not be successful out of the box. I think we should temper our judgment based on that, because as more people do it, Univision may be a much better example of somebody who's.
Well, sports has done it for a while, right? I mean, all the leagues have B2C businesses, every one of them. 60% of NBA's traffic is international, and they sell direct to consumer everywhere but the United States. They tied up their rights with Turner and ESPN in the US. Outside the United States, you buy from NBA.com. That's how it works.
HBO is going to try and check out whether or not the assumption that people will pay for it if it's easy and convenient and not too expensive. I think they're trying to test that out to see human nature, whether or not people want to pay if they
Pretty
don't.
sure Netflix has already shown that is pretty practical.
Yeah, I think you're going to see a huge uptake on HBO since they already have the numbers that people are stealing it in mass quantity because they want the content. They desperately want the content. The assumption is that they'd actually pay for it if they had the ability to pay for it.
And
So-
what's the collateral impact on the satellite and cable companies?
Well,
Companies have a pipe.
Or
still.
on the Scripps of the world, who have lots of rarely watched channels that are bundled together
that's
that you're paying for.
That's,
They have
that's
to
an
follow
entirely
suit,
different.
right?
That's an entirely different question.
Now I've got, Christoph, this is a question for MGO. From what I understand, looking at your library, you have a lot of TV content. So, is this going to be additive, just create that much more interest in consumers going to a service like MGO, or is it competitive, or what's MGO's view of?
Yeah, I think it's helping. Like Netflix opened the trail for a lot of people, but now with more and more channels coming in, I feel like it's expanding the demographics. We're seeing a massive surge of TV shows being sold on mobile devices at a pace that is faster than our best anticipation. And I think all those events just accelerate the transition. However, I still think it's going to be longer than people expect. The biggest slowdown is actually just a simple fact that people, when they go home, they're used to using the remote, the thing that is attached to their TV. It's a behavior that's been anchored in everybody for so long. It's going to take a while just to lose that habit. We've talked about those devices, tablets to become the remote. This will actually help the transition, even to move on the subway. Because when you use the same device over and over, even if it's not the right one, the cycle is very slow to break out.
Excellent. Okay, well, I'd like to open it up for a few questions here. There must be some. Okay. I will get, I want to see if anybody else has. Okay, sir.
That's too many.
No.
I just have
Please.
actually a follow-up question on the App Store point is not working. The App Store at Apple, you take iTunes and the App Store, it's about 23 billion a year with the credit card transaction things through iWallet, there's transaction stuff going on there. Most titles are games in the App Stores. What did you mean by the App Stores aren't working from a discovery perspective? It's really not.
App Store's on a TV, are much harder to find and make work than app stores on a phone or a tablet or a PC.
Like the Vizio App Store, the Samsung App Store.
Right.
Those are less successful, obviously, than something like an Apple or even a Google Play.
Particularly if one of the goals of the App Store from the manufacturer's perspective is to derive long-form revenue. They're not getting that from Netflix and Hulu Plus. They have to get it from players like us. And so you have to help people to find us.
Just a question I asked Mike Downey yesterday was, what do you do when the average number of apps downloaded on a smartphone per user is less than one? So I think when you try to translate that into an app being a channel, it gets pretty daunting. But my question is, if you have all the streaming services starting to fund content, and I mean the Netflix, the Amazon, and in my opinion, Apple as well, they're going to start developing content and owning it. When does the government get involved and break the means of display and the means of production apart?
Yeah, I don't think they do. I mean, well, yeah, I mean, Google is certainly, but governments move really slowly.
The 70s
It's
era
really hard for them to
FCC
do. I
maybe.
mean, we're still under the MCA settlement decree from whenever it was, 23 or something. It's I don't know how quickly I'm not sure that the government understands, people in government understand the impact of Google and Amazon to content creation, and those that do, I think explaining it to a bunch of, people in Congress is going to go very quickly.
Maybe the 70s FCC would have done something, not today.
But
not today.
Well, it's not even clear that the FCC
Can regulate the internet.
can regulate the internet. So we don't, we're at, net neutrality is,
Imperiled.
well, we have capitalism. The U.S. is definitely much more capitalist focused and business favored than Europe. And I don't think we're going to see much government intervention in it until it's too late.
So how can anybody who doesn't control the screen directly and the conduit to it compete?
Have good content.
Well, you are one of 70 million people making an app in the United States, and you hope you get lucky.
Well, you'll also probably see a reintegration, right? So everybody's going to pull out a cable. Everybody's going to have their own apps. Nobody's going to be able to find anything. There will be re-aggregating these apps, even if it's a free online service, a free app that basically pulls your apps into one place. There will have to be something like that, because you're right. With one app on a phone or less than one app on a phone,
That's how
I'm
you
gonna
start.
watch
I mean,
less
there's
than a
2
show
billion
on CBS.
websites, right? You find those 2 billion websites through a search engine.
And you have bookmarks where you save
Right.
your favorites.
Yes, one question in the back.
So it's mentioned that finding content is easier on a mobile device rather than a TV device or interacting better. Is there a desire for consumers to use this to find content, but then somehow get it on the big screen?
Yeah, totally. Even today, though not many people use it yet, with Sony devices, if you have an Xperia phone, you can throw it to a Sony TV.
Right.
And
Well, Chromecast.
you can throw it either by throwing the
Samsung does the
URL
same.
or by throwing the content
Yeah,
directly.
Chromecast is $20. Boom, it's on
Yeah.
your television. And it's great.
It's complicated to get set up, but once you get it set up, it works.
Apple TV is what, $90, even simpler.
Yeah, Apple TV is a bit of a walled garden. But
Oh, no kidding. Yeah.
It is. Okay, we have time for one more question. Oh, all right. Well, thank you. You've been a great audience, and please join me in thanking our panelists.
See you next year, guys.
All right.
same time, same station.